Who's already organized a hackathon? Sweet. Who's organizing another one in the next year? All right, these are my people. Awesome. We'll give people a minute to trickle in. I really appreciated that last talk. I'm going to send that to a bunch of my hackathon organizer friends. I have one note, or I have two notes about the last talk while we wait. Fruit juice, like in a lot of cases, is actually just as bad as soda. So be on the lookout for that. That is a thing. Like, there are good fruit juices and there are good like drink options, but look into it. And two, you can buy this $50 portable hammock that doesn't require like to be hung. It's just sort of like opens up like a little tent. I call them hacker hammocks. They're awesome. I've gotten a bunch for events. You can also just sort of bring them across events. They're not super expensive. So if you're looking for, well, okay, if you're looking for the easiest possible way to set up a sleeping room, you can buy like $10 inflatable mattresses. But if you're looking for just like ridiculous things, you can buy these hammocks that open up, and they cost more, but like they might get more people to like check it out and like make it cool. I am personally responsible for giving a reporter a quote that said "sleep is for the weak." By the way, I feel that was like 2011, and I feel awful about that, and that is stupid. Sleep is for like the competent. Sweet. Let's get started. Is there a reason not to? People are trickling in. Hey, people. Let's see. Yeah, seems about right. Cool. So I'm Alexey. Thanks for having me. I sound American. I'm not American, but I spent a bunch of time in the States, and I'm going to be giving you context. Hopefully context is useful. Specifically, I'm going to be giving you a brief history of what I call the student hackathon renaissance, specifically in North America and specifically over the last 5 years. I was there for parts of it. We'll get there. So what do I mean by renaissance? Renaissance is sort of a big, audacious claim. This is what I mean. So I ran an event called PennApps, and I started an event called PennApps, and this is a picture that I took in 2011. We got one of the bigger computer science auditoriums, and we like mostly filled it, and this was really, really exciting because we had not been able to do that the year before. And we were really proud of this. This was maybe like 100 people all in all, and this is 3 years later, and this is not the biggest event that year. So this is a pretty dramatic change. And it's kind of great. It's also kind of bizarre and scary and terrifying that somebody would be dumb enough to give us a stadium, right? And I will sort of explain how that happened. The purpose of this talk is to give you a bit of a sense of the sort of challenges we faced at like 50-person events, 100, 200, 500, 1,000. We're at 2,000-person events. How we overcame that, and hopefully that context will be useful. From everything that I've seen so far today, you guys are doing some awesome stuff, and you've learned a bunch. You have the benefit of MLH's hindsight, and I'm here to provide more hindsight that will hopefully help. For context, have we not refreshed this? I wonder. Let's see. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Yes, for context, this is me. I only have one stock photo. So what do? Let's see, where are we here? Where? That's not right. Come back here. Slides, they're the worst. Why is this an old version? You know what I need to do? I need to like refresh this thing. It's the worst. Sorry, guys. Because the speaker slides are like perfectly happy, and then these guys are unhappy. Here we go. So this is me. Right, there we go. Cool, so I'm a software consultant. I've done work for companies, Dropbox, Pebble, Facebook. I've done a bunch of developer evangelism. I also now travel the world and help people who want to work remotely and hang out with awesome people. It's a company called Hacker Paradise. We're in Berlin right now. We're heading to Tokyo soon. It's been sort of a crazy year. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I was the guy that started PennApps, and I had very, very little to do with the latter success that it had, but people keep giving me credit for it, and I will take it. I also have been helping other hackathons. I wrote a bunch of articles about what it was like to start the event, and people used that to start their own events, and I helped them. And then Swift was nice enough to include me when we were planning the first Hackcon, and I've done a bunch of developer evangelism. Throughout the years, I've done work for Pebble, Meteor, and Andreessen Horowitz. I've represented all of those companies at events. So I've sort of been around, though I have not thrown a student hackathon in like 4 years, so I have no credibility here. Cool. So now we know about me. I actually want to define what a hackathon, which is a weird thing, because obviously we all know. And the problem isn't that we know or don't know. It's that this guy, who either like you need to get approval from the school or you need to get money from him, he doesn't know, and he's sort of a little bit scared about it because it's got the word hack in it. And so definitions matter. And a common definition that I have found is this. It's any series of events that adds hackathon to their name because it appears to be hip and what the kids are doing. And that is probably not what you think it is, but that is what a lot of your sponsors, that is probably what your university thinks a hackathon is, and they are not wrong because we do not get to exclusively say, this is this word that we're just like claiming, and hackathon can only mean this and not another thing. And you sort of have to deal with that. This is the world that we live in. But since they get to have a definition, we get to have a definition. And here's mine. I like this one. It's short. Cool? So this is the definition I'll be working on. There are many kinds of hackathons. There are many dimensions across which we think about hackathons. Is it local? Is it just your university? Or are you flying people in from freaking halfway across the world? Don't do that. There are hackathons that are just like, we're going to build it because it's fun, and there's hackathons sort of like Startup Weekend or TechCrunch Disrupt, where it's like the startup that's like the next big thing. There are hackathons that are just fun, and we're all learning and trying things out, and there's hackathons with like huge prizes where everyone is trying to win the prize. There's hackathons that are like music hack day or comedy hack day or like civic tech, which is super fun, and there's hackathons that are just like work on whatever. There's hackathons that are run by students versus hackathons run by companies or universities. There's hackathons in a single location, and now there's hackathons in multiple locations simultaneously, or hackathons in no location, where everybody's just at home, right? And is that a hackathon? I don't know, like maybe. They claim to use the name, and they get the right to do that, so that's what happens. There's hackathons that are open to everybody. There's hackathons that are open specifically to students. And I'm going to be focusing specifically on hackathons that are not entrepreneurial, hackathons that are just like fun, and hackathons that are focused and run by students. The other things still get to be hackathons. I'm just not going to talk about them. Cool? Excellent. So I'm not going to tell you about hackathons before 2010. There is a talk given at Hackcon 1 by Jonathan Gottfried, who is one of the founders of MLH, which is like actual context about the history of hackathons and where it came from in the early 90s. And you should go watch that talk if you have not already. It is good. I'm not going to talk to you about that because it's been done. I will talk to you about what things looked like before 2010. There were hackathons on campus. They looked sort of like there was a recruiter, and that recruiter's job was to recruit people. And they would go to your campus, and they would email the CS listserv and be like, hackathon and pizza, on Saturday. And they would buy some pizza, and some people would show up, and then they would get a job at Yahoo or Microsoft. And it sort of worked for everybody. But it was just like yet another thing that happened. And that wasn't super cool for me because it was a very small event. It wasn't a very exciting event. It was just this extra thing that happened like on that weekend. And so we tried to do more than that. We decided we were going to put together a bigger event, a more exciting event. And the problem we ran into, the very first problem that maybe you guys are seeing this less, but this was a real issue, which was like, are you crazy? Like, I'm a CS student. I have work to do. Like, I'm not giving up the weekend. Like, I have a life. Like, what's wrong with you? And I got that a lot. Are people still getting this feedback? Okay, cool. So this is the thing. Like, we had to deal with this. We had a logo. This is sort of, it's not a good logo, but we had a logo, right? Like think of the 5 or 6 events that like your student organization that does things other than hackathons, if you have one, does, and then think how many of them have a logo, right? Probably just a hackathon. It's sort of, when people are thinking about it, they're thinking about it differently because you actually care. The other thing, skip this. The other thing we did is actually food trucks. As the previous speaker mentioned, I went and walked around to food trucks and said, like, hey, do you want to get in front of like 50, 100 students and cater to us? It's going to be way better than if we get pizza. And like, all these people will find out about how awesome your food was. And that worked really well. We didn't get like Coke and Sprite. I really like, there's this one company that makes like Granny's homemade iced tea. It's a very bizarre like West Coast US thing, but it's delicious, and they had it like where I was interning. I was like, how do I find that? I want to bring that to people who are coming to the hackathon. And it was a mess, but we got it. And so, I mean, I'm not bringing this up just because it's fun to be opulent, although it is fun to be opulent. The idea is that this is not another event. This is not like yet another thing. This is something that we're doing that's exciting. Like this, like it is cool to be here. This is an event that that celebrates me, that like cares, that is willing to go do lots of little things to make me excited to come. We also had prizes, and prizes are not, prizes are a whole thing. It's not obvious, good or bad, but early on, the question was like, why should I come? It's like, because there's not that many people coming, and there's like a $2,500 first prize. Like, there's a pretty good chance you'll win it. I'm ambivalent about whether you should use that, but like, we did it, and it got a bunch of people to come, and that was a net positive. The other thing that I want to talk about, which is totally in the wrong order, is I want to talk about demos. So part of a hackathon, especially for students, is education. It's this idea that you're going to learn this cool new technology and you're going to work on it. And the very first time we threw a hackathon, the way we handled that was we got a bunch of workshops and we sort of put them all throughout the first day. And, you know, like 10 people came to the workshops. It was like sort of okay. And then we went to this event in New York called Hack-and-Y. And Hack-and-Y is an incredible event put together by these two great professors. And what they did was instead of doing like 6-hour-long workshops, they did 8 3-minute demos right at the front. And the demos were awesome. There's this guy who's at GitHub now, who was at Twilio at the time, named John Britton, that gives the most incredible interactive demos. And I actually think, like, demos did not used to be this amazing. I don't know if demos are like as phenomenal, from evangelists, are as phenomenal here as they are in the States, but in the States they are great because everybody either watched John Britton or they watched somebody who learned everything they learned from a guy who watched John Britton. It's as simple as that. There was no slides, there was live coding, and it was interactive. Like, he would get people to like call in a number, and then he would show a list of all the numbers that got called, and it'd be like, ha, you thought like you were messing with me, like stuff was broken, but now I actually have all your phone numbers, which he did not use in any interesting way. But it was a great demo. Last but not least, we had a giant poster, and then everybody signed the poster, and then we hung the poster up, and then between that event and the next event, you could see that there was this thing that all these people were really excited to be part of. And so the next event, they came. And the biggest way that I can see that doing this helped is we had roughly the same signups between the first two events. We had about 95 for the first PennApps and about 115 for the second PennApps. And the number of people that actually showed up went from 45 to 95. And if you think about why that happens, consider the person who's like, I signed up, I don't know if I'm going to go. And they talk to their friends, like, should I go? Is this a thing? And the first time, some of them say yes, some of them say no. And the second time, their friend is like, dude, I was there last time. It was incredible. You have to go. This is like the coolest experience. They had these drinks. They had like demos. I built all this cool stuff. So there are many interesting ways to address that first challenge, but the biggest thing is it has to be special. It has to be something where people care about it more than like the random event your CS club is having the week after that. So that worked. We got to about 100-person events, and we would keep coming up to New York for Hack-and-Y because it was an awesome event, but people would not come down. And we actually got up in front. Like, we did that super awkward thing where like you get up during demos and you're like, hey, we're from Philly, like you guys should come to our event too, it's fun. And nobody cared. And we tried to figure out why. Well, you can't see this at all. It's because college students don't have money, and even the fact that it's like 2 hours and a $20 train ride is enough to say, like there's other things I could be doing this weekend. I've never been to this event. I've never heard of this event. Like this is a big barrier to entry. And we fixed it, as you probably can guess. We thought this would be really hard, but a member of the original team, Jonathan Long, was tasked with solving this problem, and he called a bunch of bus companies and said, you want to be a hackathon sponsor? And Megabus, which is one of these giant like busing city companies, said, yeah, sure. And they gave us 30 free tickets. And so if you wanted to come, and you were one of the first 30 people and you were in a city, you get a free ticket and you could come. And people used that. And that was really awesome. Because it turns out, like, you don't think it's a ton of money, but it worked really well for us. And I mean, we all know where busing is today, but like this was the first time that I know of where somebody said, like, I wonder if just subsidizing the trip will fix it. And it fixed it. The other thing was, I didn't really know a lot of people at other schools because I'm not American, so all of my classmates did not go to American schools. But Amalia, who was on our organizing team, was American. And she said, she called all her friends, and she had that like combination of charisma and ability to bully. I was like, hey, do you know what you're doing this weekend? You're coming to PennApps. It's going to be awesome. And people would come, and they would get their friends, and they would get organized, and they would come down and hang out. And today, this is a science, right? There is a spreadsheet in the US of all the captains from all the schools, and like how many people they think they can bring, and like, you know, the busing company that you should use. And the captains know that they organize a Facebook event, and in the Facebook event, they say, like, all right, we're going to go to this event. Everybody join. It's going to be awesome. Like, confirm. Like, this is basically a science at this point. But back at the time, it just took one charismatic, well-connected person to just make it happen. The other thing that gets people to come is competitiveness, right? It's like people will go to a football game in America, because American football is a thing, and they will go travel 6 hours with their team to watch the game. They will use that to show school spirit. People care about school spirit in America, which is great. So we could use that for hackathons. We could say, and specifically MLH did say, we're going to see who turns out to how many hackathons, and based on that, we're going to give you points, and at the end, there's going to be a giant trophy. Look at that thing, right? That is an amazing trophy. Swift is brilliant. And so that got people to come. That got articles when Maryland won the first event. They won the first season. It was a whole big thing that like you weren't just going for yourself, you were going to represent your school, and it was part of your identity. And this brought us up to like 250, maybe like 300. It was like a large event. We were super excited that we made this work. And then some freshman was like, we could do bigger. And they had a 500-person event at a stadium. And the challenge that we're running into here is you run out of CS students. Like maybe before, if at like a hackathon ran by a recruiter, you get like 5 or 10% of the undergrads to come, undergrad CS students. Now you're getting like 25, 30, 40. But there's only so many undergrads, and a bunch of them still are going to be like, it's my weekend, leave me alone. So how do you fix that? Well, there's this sort of chicken and egg problem where, like, what causes what? Because clearly in the last 5 years, Silicon Valley has had a nice resurgence. Startups seem to be cool again. And so CS enrollment has gone up. Like 1 in 8, the single and most popular course at both Harvard and Stanford are now Intro to Computer Science. I think 1 in 4 Stanford students, 1 in 8 Harvard students take that class. That was not the case 5 years ago, so you just sort of have a larger pool to bring from. And the question you ask yourself is, okay, is the rise in computer science causing more people to go to hackathon, or is the fact that hackathons are cool causing more people to go to computer science? And you see articles like this, right? There's this now, hackathons, computer science, it becomes a whole thing, roughly like 2012-ish. This is Dave Fonno, who started MHacks, the other like relatively well-known hackathon from the US run by students. And his story is, he was one of those guys who like brought 25 people from Michigan to PennApps and had a phenomenal transformational time. He was actually a freshman business student at the time. And his quote is, we came back and half of us switched our majors to CS. And this is a transformational shift, right? The original shift, the original purpose of a hackathon is, at least implicitly or explicitly, like to me this is explicit, but the original purpose of a student hackathon is, you're a CS student, but you don't actually like use the thing for more than just doing homework. It's sort of like if you were studying literature and you never like wrote anything interesting other than just like analysis, right? But you have this cool, unique, beautiful, rare talent. You're not making stuff with it, and it's sort of a making culture. And so hackathons are a tool for converting CS students into makers. And Dave's argument is broader than that. He says, no, hackathons are this ultimate tool of creation. Cool hackathons are inspiring, but like the future is technology, and hackathons are this epitome of this, and hackathons are this life-changing event. And it doesn't matter if you were studying computer science or not, just show up, sort of get swept up in the energy, see how amazing it is, and then later you might study computer science, you might not. Like there is no prerequisite that this is for CS students. This is for people who are excited about being part of this future and this maker culture. And this is a different audience. This is a less nerdy audience than what had been to hackathons earlier. And this broadened and both brought more people into CS, brought more people into hackathons. I think this was the thing that allowed the community to expand to the larger sizes that we've seen. So there's still hackathons. There's still challenges with running bigger events. I'm going to run through this really quick because, well, you guys need to get here to get benefit from how you fix the challenges at a 500 and more person event. But it's basically harder. Like, I am a truly incompetent manager and organizer. Like, the team that ran the event was basically me and a bunch of friends that I roped in, and we had a highly dysfunctional but somehow productive way of getting things done. And we sort of pulled things together at the last minute. I imagine a bunch of you have similar stories. And that works for like 100, 150 people. And then as you get bigger, like more things need more leeway. The administration gets more and more pissed at you because you're doing things at the last minute. Like buses, like just lots and lots of things get harder. So I'm going to power through these. So demos are just impossible. If you try to do traditional, like let's get everybody 2 minutes in front of everyone, past like 50 demos, that's ridiculous because, right, this is your audience. I just want to add one more photo of a person sleeping. So demos, so now we have the expo or the science fair, which a lot of places have adopted. That was a big solution that came out from around then. You no longer can trust university Wi-Fi. They'll tell you you can, they're lying. You can't get free space anymore. The university is happy to give you like a little, like some nominal space for free, but once you've got 1,000 people, like you're probably paying like 5 figures for that space at least. You can't ask a food truck to cater for 1,000 people. So you have to use a corporate caterer. They cost more and aren't as good. So that's no fun, except for the ones here. The food here is phenomenal. Thank you guys. Right, just like you have to be organized 6 months in advance for some things. I also, the big one that I do want to talk about in terms of larger events is culture gets harder. So if you have a small event, then there's usually the person who's sort of like setting the tone for the event, because it's the MC, it's the person who did all the work, and they get in front of everybody and they talk about the kind of event they want to run. And whether they explicitly or implicitly talk about inclusivity, sort of by the way they behave and by the fact that they're almost always there, you have this ability to set the tone for like, this is the sort of community we want to create. And if people are behaving in a way that's adverse to that, if they're making people feel unwelcome, or if they're just, I mean, the big one is obviously misogyny. Like if they are behaving in ways that are intentionally or unintentionally misogynistic, you are there and you can talk to them and you see it. And people who might do that will do it less because they know that you're there. And at a larger event, there are more dark spaces where people will be making jokes that are uncomfortable. Like talking to a lot of my friends that have had alienating experiences at hackathons, it has been at larger events because the amount of work and forethought required to make the entire space a safe space and to get that message across is harder when not everybody sees you most of the time. And so you have to step back and think about it, and you have to be more strategic around inclusivity and around making sure that your culture isn't poisonous. And MLH does a bunch of really great stuff with code of conduct and a reporting mechanism that helps you with that, but that's not a free pass. You can't just be like, oh, MLH has a thing, and so like our hackathon culture is fine. Like you have to, it has to be one of the things you think about. It's not an afterthought, especially once you get past a size where you're not there all the time. So that was mega events. Then we had Hackcon. The first Hackcon was in January 2014. And we got everybody together and we said, okay, well, like what now? Okay, so the events have gotten bigger. That's great, but like bigger is not necessarily better, right? Like, okay, you had an 800-person event and you had like a 900-person event and you had a 1,000-person event. Now we had an 1,100-person event. Great, like there's lots of big events. This is not necessarily, like past a certain size, it does not necessarily translate into quality events for the community. It does not necessarily achieve the goals of hackathons, which is empowering people and getting them excited about what's going on. And so from this conversation, we got to hear about a bunch of events that intentionally position themselves in a different way to serve the hackathon community. Big Camp was much more of a, like really a campsite. Like the way they describe it, it was sort of it was an experience more than a hackathon. And I mean, it sounds like bullshit, but like this was real. They did a really great job of, this is an event we're going to come together. We're people that are excited about this, and we're going to, you know, there's going to be some hacking, but there's also going to be a lot of talks, and we're going to do like sit around and like share, and we're going to have s'mores, and I mean this sounds ridiculous, but this was just a really well-organized event that was not like, all right, let's make the best hack, but was still a hackathon. The other types that I really like are events like Hack at Brown and Columbia's event, Adiku, and they're specifically focused on learning and on mentoring. Hack at Brown in particular does this really cool thing where instead of having a bunch of students working on stuff and mentors walking around like trying to be helpful where they can, each team just gets a mentor, and that mentor is with them throughout the event. The mentor may get more sleep than you, hopefully. And they say basically if you're excited about learning and if you're excited about the sort of mentorship that you can get from the kind of people that come from industry to work on these events, you should come to our event. There's also a lot more stuff recently, and this is honestly, like, I have not seen this personally. I've heard of it, and I'm excited about it. There are more events that are specific. There's events that are specific for women. There's events that are specifically targeted African Americans. There are minority groups that do not currently feel super welcome at a traditional hackathon, and the barrier to entry for them is higher because they look around and people don't look like them. And that, like, that is not a fun place to be. And it takes extra courage to go and say, you know what, I think I do belong here. And when you have events that make it easier to get involved and where people do feel similar to you, it is a lot easier to join the community, to be part of the community, and to help set the tone that, like, this is an inviting and welcome and happy space. It's not the only challenge that we talked about out of Hackcon. As there are more events will start just grabbing, there's only so many weekends in a semester. And so you're probably not there yet, you're hopefully not there yet, but events will start competing. And this is a recent thing. Like, this is 2015, January 2015, MHACs and PennApps are in the same weekend. And I can tell you how that happens. That's ego, right? And these event organizers all want to be the biggest event, and they want to be the coolest event. And what they will do is they'll play this game of chicken where they'll be like, we're taking this weekend, because the first weekend of the semester is the best because nobody's busy yet, right? And the weekend, there's specifically Martin Luther King Day has Monday off, so it's a great time to have a hackathon. And so they're like, we're doing it here, well, we're doing it here too, and you're just waiting for one of them to give up, and then in this particular case, just nobody gave up. So sometimes it's ego, and this is gonna happen, but sometimes, just because there's a spreadsheet now of what all the events are, and MLH has a list of upcoming hackathons, you can resolve a lot of those conflicts earlier on so you're not distributing resources in a way that is inefficient if your goal is to make sure people have a good experience. Finally, the bottlenecks that we talked to are just, you sort of run out of sponsors, right? Like, I worked for Pebble as a developer evangelist for a little while, and hackathons would pitch us all the time, and we were not going to go to all those events because we like sleep, and like we want some weekends to ourselves, and there's like 3 or 4 events a weekend. It's just not, like, unless you are a large organization, you're not going to be able to support that sort of volume. And also, the organizers, like, you don't know if it's going to be a good event because it's a lot of first-time organizers, and inevitably you're going to run into issues as people scale. And again, this gets solved largely thanks to MLH. So the organizer experience, the guide is really great from everything that I've seen so far. If you haven't been to guide.mlh.io, go, it's good. On the hardware side, so whenever MLH goes to an event now, there are Pebbles there because it's part of the hardware lab. And so as Pebble, that's really awesome because we get a lot more exposure, and we don't actually have to go to all these events. We want to go to some events, but we don't have the manpower or the budget to go to all of them. And this means everybody wins. The final problem that I want to talk about is cash money. Everybody likes cash money. We used cash money early on in PennApps to get people to show up. But as events grew larger, the like cash money sponsorship grew. Like, the first prize went to like 5K, then 10K. I think it might have even gone above that in some cases. And you create some really weird incentives when you go that high. You start to invite a class of people who are like, we're gonna go and we're gonna win. And so we're just gonna like spend the whole time optimizing how we're gonna win in this event. And so it becomes less about creativity and about exploring and more about like optimizing for the demo or optimizing to convince the judges. And at that point, the value, like, it's no longer a jam session, it's a competition. And maybe that's okay if that's the event you're looking for, that's reasonable. But for a lot of the organizers from the first Hackcon, that isn't what we wanted. And the money was sort of there because we thought we needed it because other events had money. And starting after 2014, a lot of that basically went down. There's still some prizes. It might just be a trophy. It might be like an iPad or something. But it's no longer so much that like people are going just to win. And it's no longer so much that people are like doing all the work a week before and trying to submit it as a finished product. So you spend a lot less time worrying about cheating and about like starting early if the grand prize isn't just that big of a deal compared to just coming and sort of being part of this idea. So that was an awesome result of the first Hackcon. Like, prizes actually went down. So the biggest remaining challenge is really just that the format is stale. Like, the biggest recent thing is the prizes have gone down. We've gotten rid of, we've gotten prizes. We've got the expo now, so you don't have to sit 6 hours through demos. But more or less since that, like, things are a little bit bigger. Great. Like, the next PennApps is going to be 2,000. Like, great. Like, that's good, I guess, because there's more people coming, but it's sort of still the same thing. So one thing that I'm really proud of that I've seen as a result of like a recent innovation is the work that Chai has been doing around local hack day. I think he's going to be talking about it later today. But basically, a local hack day lowers the bar even more to starting your first event. You don't have to go raise money and do a full-featured hackathon. You can just do a hack day that's happening at all these universities at the same time. There's a lot more support. There's a lot less work. You can get your feet wet as an organizer without needing necessarily to commit to the hundreds of hours of work that it takes to put together a hackathon. And finally, I think the next step is we just need more like young freshmen who are just willing to try crazy shit, right? Like, we used to think that a big event was like 100, and then we thought it was 300, and then we thought it was 500, and now there's 2,000. We're not even like really that excited about it, or I'm not really that excited about it. I mean, it's kind of exciting, and so we just need more like crazy young freshmen like me, like 2 inches of hairline ago, right? To just go and try things just because they think it'd be cool if it existed. And that's the message that I have for you. Just go and try interesting things because it's fun.
Thank you, Alexey. So, the reoccurring theme of today is that we don't have time for questions because we're massive overrun. But does anyone have questions? Oh, there's a couple. Oh, we've got to let Robbie do it.
I don't need a microphone. You mentioned the cultural issues. Do you have any advice for the people in the audience that are actually organising hackathons and how to overcome those issues? Because I think ultimately we want these to be great, fun experiences. So, any advice on that front?
Sorry, just to repeat the question over the microphone. That's right. Alexey mentioned some cultural issues. Robbie was asking if he has any advice to organisers on how to tackle those issues, because obviously we want the events to be fun and welcoming.
Yeah. So first of all, MLH is a great resource for that. Like, talk to them. They've seen this problem hundreds of times, or they've seen hackathons run hundreds of times. They've seen this problem come up. They have experience looking at it. Like, we say cultural issues, but in my experience, the vast majority of it is just the fact that, like, most people in computer science are white nerdy dudes, and white nerdy dudes are vaguely misogynistic in ways that, like some of them are just like jerks, and some of them just don't realize that when they do a certain thing, it makes people feel unwelcome. And in my experience, the biggest way that you can make an event comfortable is you can be explicit around, hey, this happens sometimes, and here's an example of this happening, and here's the result it has, and like, here's how we can work together as a group that has these values to make sure that this is a welcoming event. Because nobody going to a hackathon is like, man, like, I wish there were fewer women here, right? They're sort of clueless. I think the vast majority of bad things that happen unintentionally. And so your role is to bring it up. Your role is to educate. Your role is to make it feel like a collaborative conversation around what are the values for this community of hackers that we have brought together. Like, how do we want to behave ourselves? Like, what is the message that we want to send about, like, who is welcome here? I don't have specific tactical advice other than, like, really think about it, really talk to people, and don't try to treat it as an afterthought.
Wonderful. Cool. Thank you very much, Alexey.
Thank you.